welcome everyone. We're super excited to be here at Unite to talk about something that every studio is trying to get right, and that's monetization that actually works for your players. We're going to keep things practical, actionable, and leave some time for questions at the end. So we can start off by introducing ourselves. Oops, helps if I use the right button. I'll try that again. So we'll introduce ourselves. I'm Franco, and yes, if you've not met me before, the accent doesn't quite match the name, as I hail from Edinburgh in Bonnie, Scotland. And if anyone watched the World Cup qualifiers last night, we had a cracking game against Denmark, and we're going to be in the World Cup since the 90s. So no promises that we're going to be any good, but at least we're there. But jokes aside, I've been part of the games industry for almost 15 years now. My background is in game design, but I head up the game design and revenue consultancy team within Unity, which we'll tell you a bit more about in a moment. But yeah, enough about me. I'll pass on to my colleague Zoe here, who will introduce herself.
Yeah, so as Franco said, my name is Zoe. I'm currently based in Montreal, but I'm especially happy to be here in Barcelona today because this is actually my hometown. So it's a city where I grew up, where I learned to love data and games. So yeah, there's something special about doing a talk here. So thank you everyone for being here today with me. I've been working with Franco for 2 years now as a game analytics consultant.
Perfect. But before we kick things off properly, we're going to quickly frame why monetization matters to players today. Now, as the mobile market grows, so do player expectations. And monetization isn't just about making money, weird to say. It has to feel fair, rewarding, and non-intrusive. If you get it wrong, your players will leave. But if you do get it right, it's going to drive both engagement and revenue. And that's a challenge a lot of studios are facing. So trying to figure out how to grow revenue without hurting the player experience at the same time. So we're going to cover a few things today. First, we're going to kick off with an intro to the team, what we do. Again, just give you some context behind what we do at Unity that leads into all the stuff we're going to talk about today. Then we'll dive into some of the core challenges of relying solely on in-app purchases in your games. And then we'll look at the benefits of rewarded ads. And then from there, we'll walk you through what we call the kind of player-first approach to monetization. So how to build systems that actually work for players and your revenue.
Yeah, we'll also be sharing an implementation roadmap with a step-by-step guide that you can then use when you're back at home to know how to go from no ads to ads, and so that you're aware of what you need to be doing at each of the steps. We're going to be presenting a real live example, so how Metacore, the studio behind the Merge Mansion game that you might have heard of, worked with us and with Unity in order to go from an IAP, so in-app purchase only model, to a hybrid one that was very successful. We'll wrap the session up with some practical takeaways, and at the end, of course, we'll have time for any questions that you may have.
Perfect, thanks, Zoe.
No worries.
So let's crack on. So data is only useful if it leads to action. And at Unity, our team really focuses on sort of turning data into real-world strategies. So I'm going to start off by, again, sharing how we help studios succeed. So a little bit of background, a little bit of context behind what we do. Our team at Unity is made up of analysts and game designers with decades of games industry experience. We're very collaborative as a team. We operate out of the UK, the US, and Canada, but we're working with studios all around the world, providing best practice advice and then giving valuable, actionable insights to our clients, much like Sega, who gave us this lovely testimony recently. We're quite unique in the consulting space since we're not just relying on our individual sort of industry experience. We're making use of the aggregate and anonymized data that we have access to within Unity from sort of billions of devices worldwide. So all our insights are all kind of evidence-based, and we do a lot of research. So for the past 10 years, this blended teams has been sort of learning from the data to build best practice advice and feedback on what works and what doesn't work when it comes to making successful games. But yeah, we've worked across just about every platform and game genre you can imagine, collaborating with almost every major gaming studio out there, along with indies and even one-person studios as well. We've worked on Amazon Alexa skills right up to your kind of AAA PC, console, and VR titles. But we are very heavily focused in the mobile free-to-play space, and we've been sort of pre-ads. Again, we're very player-centric as a team, and seen that it's very important to keep the player experience happy. We're all gamers within the team as well, so that is very much our core focus. But yeah, we've even worked in the non-gaming space as well. We've done projects with companies like Tinder, which was a really interesting conversation with my wife why I had that app on my phone. But anyway, enough about us. Again, some context there. We do get some interesting projects from time to time. Maybe my wife's dialing in, what? So although we look at the full picture when it comes to our project work, one of our core focus areas amongst the consulting team at Unity is proper ad implementation. So, and a really sort of common misconception is that ads in game design should be thought about separately, but in reality, great game design drives great monetization, and when players enjoy the experience, they engage more, whether that's through just IAPs or ads as well. So maybe we'll get one more flash of that so you can, okay, read quick. There we go. Let's go to the next one. So yeah, I'll pass over to Zoe to kind of talk through some of the challenges of IP-only revenue, and then we'll dive deeper into this with some real-world examples after that.
Yeah. So after a few accidents, now you know who we are and what we do. So I can be talking about some of the challenges that most of the studios that work with us face often. That those challenges are the one related with IP-only revenue. So in order to talk about that, I want to explain why sustaining an IP-only game can be challenging based on 3 problematic scenarios that you can encounter. The first one being limited player spend. So I said I'm a game analytics consultant, and as a data analyst, I love to dig out interesting data points, and I think it's an important thing to be doing regularly. So select a bunch of KPIs, have them up to date in order to be checking regularly market trends so that you're aware and you can make informed decisions whenever you're building a game or working with your game. And what I can say right now is that, interestingly, only 0.5% of daily active users actually engage with in-app purchases. So that means that, of course, if your game is very good, this rate can go up to 3.4%, but the median is lower to 1%. So that means that there's actually 99% of the player base that you're not able to reach when you're focusing on IAP only. And this supposes a very big challenge for IP-only monetization because you're leaving a massive audience on the table. Another challenge that we encounter with IP-only monetization is the dependence on whales. Now, we define whales as the high spenders within a game. So players that spend a lot of money and that spend continuously. The rest of the players, we will define them as minnows. They still spend, but not as much, and it's something that's not continuous, like they don't spend regularly within the game, so it's just something that's punctual. Interestingly, we see that whales make up to only 10% of the player base, but they account for 60% of the total IAP revenue. On the previous slide, I mentioned that only 1% of the players actually engage with in-app purchases, but even out of this 1% who pays, 10% of the revenue, the biggest part of the revenue is coming from 10% of them. So if we add that up, that means that your biggest chunk of revenue is coming from only 0.1% of your player base. We agree that this is not what we should be, where our focus should be. So that brings us to revenue concentration risks. Because what happens if that 0.1% of your whales decides to stop spending? Then your game finally will probably enter a financial stability risk. Secondly, this also creates some game design challenges because relying heavily on spenders when designing a game and designing the game for them will make the rest of the players, which I remind you is the vast majority of, feel like they're being forgotten and that the game is designed only for people that is willing to pay. So that will build frustration will build up, that will create pay-to-win scenarios and restrictive gameplay elements, and eventually it will hurt your retention because players might start leaving. And yeah, then we have the third challenge, which is market saturation. You know that each passing day, the markets are more and more saturated, and this is also true for the gaming market. So each passing day, there are more and more games out there which you have to compete with in order to bring attention to your players. And it's like in real life. Like, there's a shrinking chance that a player is going to be spending money on your game. Whenever you enter a grocery store, you're not going to be purchasing the whole products that there's available on the store. You need to be selective and mindful of where you want to spend your money on. So a player feels the same way. He's not going to spend on every free-to-play mobile game that they play. They're going to be choosing which one they want to be spending on. So that makes it even more hard to be the ones that get lucky and where players decide to spend money. So, and another challenge that we have is user acquisition costs also go higher every year. And this is especially true with the global economy becoming more expensive year after year. And finally, we also have genre-specific challenges. Not every genre will respond to IAP the same way. There are some genres like RPGs and strategy genres that are very good at driving IAP, but other more casual genres like puzzle games or word games struggle with IAP monetization. So diversifying our monetization strategy will allow us to reach more audiences and reach more like different type of genres as well. So I've talked a little bit about the challenges of IAP models, but I want to be talking about the benefits of adding advertising revenue to your games. Let's start with a quick refresher on the type of ads that you might see within games. We like to classify them within system-initiated ads and user-initiated ads. Now, as the name says, system-initiated ads are ads that are automatically initiated by the system. So out of those, we have banner and interstitials. Banner are small static placements that usually stay out of the way. They're rather at the bottom or the top of the screen, and they usually refresh automatically with new content. And interstitials are full ad screens that pop up unprompted. If they're well implemented, which we usually recommend, they will be found between levels or at transition moments. And they're optional, so you can opt out by closing the interstitial. But there's usually a required time to watch the ad that you cannot, where you cannot pass it. And on the other hand, we have user-initiated ads. The main difference with the one I just talked about, they rely solely on player choice in order to be triggered. So a player is going to try to watch an ad or complete an offer in order to get something in return. And that something in return usually has value within the game, like premium currency or some sort of booster, and allows them to progress a little bit faster. As I said, converting from IAP-only model to a more hybrid one can be tricky. And this is especially true because IAP-only games tend to have more hardcore audiences that might be a little bit reactive to ads, especially those that are the system-initiated ads, because they feel like they're losing control over their gameplay experience. But that doesn't mean that ad models wouldn't work within your game. We usually recommend to test it out before completely rejecting the idea. And in general, when we're observing results, we see that user-initiated ads are better in order to preserve user experience. And when they're implemented correctly, we're even observing better retention results when ads are implemented within games rather than not having ads at all.
OK, perfect. Thanks again, Zoe. I'll give you a break now. OK, so we now understand that there's many ways to integrate ads into a game. But for today's session, we're going to be sort of focusing exclusively on rewarded ads. So let's take a look at some of the best practices when it comes to rewarded ads, so video ads, obviously, specifically. Now, ultimately, they give players the ability to test paid content. So instead of paying real money for premium content, they can trade 30 seconds or a minute of gameplay time to try it out. Even if it's a smaller version of the content, it still allows them to sort of test whether they like it or not. And who knows, if they do like it, they might decide to purchase it at a later date with real money. Another benefit is that these ads are completely optional. If players don't want to interact with the ad, it's totally fine. They can skip it, ignore it, and then move on, continue playing without any interruption at all. Just like our example that we've got up on the screen here from Trash Tycoon. And this is where players can sort of choose to watch a rewarded ad or use premium currency to expand their production space in this idle game. So again, like when we're looking at games, giving them players the option, they can even sort of almost have that cost, that value attached to watching the ad as well. So it's good to give players the option in terms of, again, that premium currency sync and potentially that ad watch as well. And then obviously balancing and capping those interactions are good too. On the second example here, like these type of ads help players sort of progress deeper into the game and experience more of the game. And an ad placement as a revive or a continue option can allow your players to extend their gameplay sessions and overall experience. So this second example here is from Clone Ball, where players can sort of watch a short ad to increase their chances of success on their next try. So again, the players feel instant value, they get another try, and it helps alleviate that pain from failure as well. So there's a lot of kind of player psychology baked into these ads as well to elevate that experience. Now, obviously, the primary benefit is advertising revenue. It's one of the pillars of the mobile gaming industry today, and ultimately, it helps keep the lights on. So it's something that should be considered if it fits into your game. Another benefit that I like is that the ads can encourage users to interact with specific functions of your game, such as opening the IAP store. And I'll share some examples in a moment about that as well. So if we place an ad that provides value to the user, and it piques their interest, it can encourage them to visit the store more often, and again, potentially make a secondary purchase. So yeah, once they're there, they might see something else. So finally, oops, sorry, I'm using the wrong machine here. There we go. The benefit, oh my God, I'm out of sync here. Yeah, that's perfect. So the benefit to developers, so yes. So ads can also help maintain game balance, and Zoe touched on this as well in her slides. So Zoe talked about if you're focusing on IAPs, it can create frustration through paywalls and pay-to-win mechanics. And rewarded ads can help balance those and help with the game economy by introducing these alternative revenue and resource streams. Even if a player doesn't want to spend real money, they can still collect additional rewards and resources through these ad interactions and then continue to enjoy the game. So this approach really helps prevent that pay-to-win scenario, reduces the player frustration, and then ultimately improving retention by mitigating churn. So we've seen the challenges of relying solely on in-app purchases, so low conversion rates, high dependence on whales, market saturation. But the good news here is that there's a way to diversify revenue while still keeping players engaged. And that's where player-friendly advertising strategies come into play. But I like to kind of take a step back, and it might sound a bit like a no-brainer, but it's still very much worth mentioning. A great advertising strategy isn't going to be a magic fix for your game. It only works if your game itself is fundamentally solid. If you're struggling to convert on in-app purchases, ads aren't going to suddenly make you lots of money. So it means it's really important to make sure that your game is fundamentally sound first. So optimizing the onboarding experience, the difficulty curve, and economy so players actually want to stay in your game. If the early game is frustrating, your players are going to leave before they actually get to see your monetization. So let's take a look at the considerations to make when creating your advertising strategy. And a common mistake in monetization is treating it as a one-size-fits-all solution. But in reality, the players are going to be interacting with monetization in many different ways. Some players spend, some engage with ads, some do a mix of both. So the key is really understanding those behaviors and designing monetization that works with all these different play styles. And this is where segmentation becomes a really, really powerful tool. And it lets us tailor monetization to different player motivations instead of forcing the same approach on absolutely everyone. And this is where we do a lot of work. We've done projects that span multiple years where we look at this type of thing and segmenting players and taking a very careful approach. So not every player is going to be making a purchase right away, and it's good to understand that that's absolutely fine. Rewarded ads can really act as an on-ramp to monetization. So letting players experience that content before committing to a purchase, like I've said. So watching an ad to get an extra life, speeding up a timer, lets players experience the benefit of spending at the cost of time. So this enables players to set their own value proposition as they're playing your game. But one of the key things is that ads should seamlessly integrate into the experience. They shouldn't feel disruptive or tacked on. So they should sort of serve a player need, desire, or want. If players feel forced into watching the ad, they're going to disengage. And that can lead to distrust, negative sentiment, or churn. We've seen lots of games that have kind of forced ads down players' throats or feel that rewarded ads are a necessity to progress in the game. So it's really a really careful balance. So here, balance is absolutely critical, and the key to hybrid monetization is making sure that ads and IAPs work together, not against each other. So rewarded ads should never replace spending, but instead be an alternative path to the non-paying players in your game, while still offering that value to spenders, giving them ways to extend their gameplay when they choose to. Some games actually introduce rewarded ads only to the non-payers at first, ensuring revenue grows without sort of disrupting the spenders. So it's an interesting approach that we've seen, but in reality, we've also seen that spenders want access to these rewarded ads too. So in the past, we've even seen sort of complaints on Reddit from paying players who feel left out when they're not seeing rewarded ads. I've had several sort of like studios that we've worked with as well seeing comments of like maybe people in the same household playing the same game. One's a spender, one's not. And the person that has access to the rewarded ads actually getting deeper into the game because they've got that additional resource. So it is very careful balancing act. And when you're thinking about your spenders, think about a way to approach them with rewarded ads, but in a way that's managed, again, through capping and timers and daily cadence of reward availability. But yeah, that being said, balance is key. If you're going to flood players with too many rewarded ads, it's going to lead to diminishing returns for you and disrupt your in-game economy. But how do you find the right balance between pacing and placement in your game? And that's where testing comes into play. So finding the right setup isn't always easy, and it's sometimes a regular struggle with studios trying to tackle these problems. So good monetization is hard, and we totally understand that. It's not just about driving your revenue, it's about keeping the player experience smooth and fair. So this is where A/B testing becomes really powerful, and it can really make a difference. So you can experiment with different reward setups, timing, or rewarded ad placements, and then see how players actually respond to that. Not every test you're going to do is going to be a breakout hit, and that's completely fine. Even the ones that don't work teach you something valuable on your next iteration. So if you're not sure how that change is going to land, try rolling it out to a very small group first, see how that works, and then move on from there. So these kinds of experiments let you shape the experience around real player behavior. So you can adjust things like the way that works for your game and also your players.
Great. So with everything that Franco and I said until now, I'm going to try to take all of the bits of information and put them together into an implementation roadmap that you can then use in order to start adding ads to your game. So we'll break this down into three phases. First, there's player segmentation. You're going to define a few categories for your players in order to run some tests. So there's pilot testing. We will help you define those tests and decide when they're ready to scale up. And finally, we'll go with iteration and optimizing. This is especially important to keep refining your hybrid model. So this is one of the most important steps of the process. So first, we have player segmentation. one common approach and one that we recommend to studios that ask for help is to start segmenting players by payer behavior. So we defined before our whales, our minnows, and our non-spenders. This is a good categorization to have in order to start an A/B test to implement a hybrid model. Why am I saying that? So Franco just mentioned that players want to see rewarded ads in general, but some players, some players that pay money, are more reactive to interstitials, for example. So we might benefit from not showing interstitials or system-initiated ads with the same frequency to our payers versus to our non-spenders. For example, whales, so high spenders, like to watch rewarded ads in order to maximize the rewards that they are already purchasing, or the ones that they're already getting within the game. Minnows like to also interact with rewarded ads, in order to enhance the few rewards that they already have, or in some cases, in order to try out some premium currency before converting. And non-spenders is our most important group for ad monetization, because they're going to be relying on ads in order to get things within the game. So once we've segmented that way as a first approach, we're going to go into pilot testing. This is where we set our A/B tests. And as Franco mentioned, it is very important to do it in a small, controlled audience. It is easier to fix a mistake when it's done in a small scale. We just kill the test, nothing happened here, everything is the same. The game is not broken. So this is an important recommendation that we would like you to respect if you're implementing A/B tests. So when we're testing, we're typically testing which ad formats, which placements, and which reward systems work best. But just as important as what we test is how we set up those tests. So make sure that before you're testing, you have your analytics dashboards ready, and that your hypotheses are clear and straight to the point. You do not want to be testing many things at the same time, because if something fails, you won't be able to you won't know which of the changes was accountable for that failure. So keep your hypothesis straightforward. Have a small set of KPIs that you know are going to be useful in order to decide whether a test was successful or not, and make sure that you always keep the test straight to the point. So we've run our tests, we've got some results, and now we want to know what we need to be doing, if we can scale up or not, based on the results that we've obtained. So I want to go through some scenarios that you can encounter when running a test. First is IAP cannibalization. This means that your IAP is taking a negative impact due to your ads, but that could not be negative if the whole revenue is going up. But IAP cannibalization is defined when your revenue is also lowering when you're integrating ads into the game. So when that happens, we usually recommend to lower the rewards that you're giving away. You might be being too generous. So if in a placement you're giving away 10 gems, instead of ruling out the entire experiment, try cutting it to 5 and see what happens then. Another scenario that you can encounter is retention decrease. So retention isn't going as well as it used to be. This is probably due because players are watching too many ads, or they're feeling forced onto them. So when this happens, it's simple. Just lower the frequency of the ads that you're showing, and make sure that the placements that you're integrating in the game are meaningful and feel unique and special to the player. And then another scenario that you can encounter is that the average revenue per daily active user goes up, and there's no negative impact on retention. Then that's great. It's exactly what we're looking for, and you can start scaling up your experiments. So choose a wider coverage range, regional coverage. So You were first testing out on a specific region. Now you can widen the coverage. You were first testing at around 5 to 10% of your player base. You can now go to 25 to 50% of the user base. Then you will collect more data, more significant data, and you'll be able to keep analyzing those results. And then we have phase 4. This is iteration and optimization. So Franco mentioned this already, but there's no one-size-fits-all solution. The key here is to get your hands dirty and test. You can go ahead and check at what your competitors are doing. You can try to copy them, but the real way you're going to find the balance that works for your game and for your audience is to actually try it out yourself. So the phase 1 was about player segmentation. Here is a good moment to start segmenting in different ways. You already have something that seems to be working, but you want to find segmentations that allow you to refine even more your hybrid model. So you can think about session length. So there's players that like to have long sessions, and there's players that like to have shorter sessions, but maybe more frequently. They might not have the same needs for ad watches. So doing another segmentation here might help you uncover potential that you weren't tapping onto before. So I feel like phase 4 is a good moment to be experimenting a little bit more with other types of segmentation. You can think of, I mentioned session length, but you can be thinking about other kinds that you feel like are interesting for you. As a benchmark, we usually say aim for 50% of daily active users engaging with your ads, with rewarded ads and offer walls, mostly. Individual placements usually cap at around 10 to 30%. So that's why we recommend having a variety of placements and a variety of different rewarded ads so that you can get to that 50% mark that we are recommending. And on the revenue side, you want to be protecting your eCPM floor. So it is very important to not train players to spam ads. So do not train them to watch ad after ad after ad after ad. That, in the end, will lower your the value that each of the ads has. And to put it very simply, it's just not fun. So players aren't playing a game in order to watch ads. They're playing the game to have a fun experience. So that's just not the way to do it. Instead, focus on high-quality placements that feel natural for your game and that are adding to the experience instead of taking away. One of the best examples here is the one that Franco mentioned with the post-level rewards, where a player gets to watch an ad in order to duplicate the reward that they're getting. It feels like it's low effort for them to watch it at that moment, and it's a win-win scenario for everyone. Yeah.
All good?
Yes.
Right, I'll give you a break now. So yeah, amazing stuff. So we've seen the challenges, the benefits, and how to think about building a more hybrid monetization model. But let's have a look at a real-world success story that highlights what happens when great design meets thoughtful monetization. Now, Metacore, the studio behind the successful Merge Mansion, partnered with our consulting team to unlock new revenue potential. And if you're not familiar with the game, Merge Mansion is a visually rich puzzle meets narrative game where players gradually uncover family secrets by restoring a sprawling estate. And then there's this sort of creepy grandma that's hiding something. Maybe it's something sinister. Maybe it's just some nice pies. Who knows? But it's a really deeply engaging experience and with a loyal long-term player base. So if you've not played the game, it's worth checking out. Now, with millions of engaged players in their game, many of whom were not spending, the challenge wasn't just engagement, but it revolved around monetization. So rather than them pushing harder on in-app purchases, Metacore's goal was to evolve their model without harming retention or harming their IAP performance. So that's where our collaboration began in terms of helping them design a player-first monetization approach that layered in these rewarded ads strategically and, most importantly, sensitively. Now, this timeline is just a snapshot of how that sort of unfolded, and we're still kind of working with them today. And we had this kind of clear split between consultation, which our team led, and then the production, which was fully driven by Metacore's internal teams. So the first few months focused on consultation and foundational design. So we worked really closely with Metacore to understand their player journey, recommend high-impact rewarded video placements, and then define segmentation and these cool-down strategies. So from April 2024 onward, Metacore began testing these placements just in 2 countries to begin with. And then performance data started to come in. They refined their rollout, adding more ad networks, testing earlier placements in the player journey. And then they gradually started to scale to a more global audience. So by August, they had 3 placements live for all their non-payers in the game. And then by early 2025, that had scaled to 6 live placements. And I mentioned before about the non-payers, the payers not getting these ads. Metacore was a prime example of people going, hey, why am I not getting these ads? I want to see these ads because it's going to benefit my experience in the game. So again, that was an interesting experience to see that happening in real time. And one good thing to understand here, it wasn't just a kind of flip the switch process. It was phased. Player first rollout to kind of build and scale sustainably. And it was all while protecting both the UX and monetization integrity. Now, the results were pretty significant, especially among the non-payers in the game. Sessions per users jumped by 10%. Rewarded ad engagement doubled. Overall ad revenue climbed by 24%. And then the average revenue per daily active user went up by 5%. And then what is the key takeaway from this is none of that came to the expense of in-app purchases. In fact, it actually helped boost in-app purchases. For players, ads became a way to unlock more value, spend longer in the game, and progress faster in the game. So it wasn't a trade-off. And again, it's that win-win scenario. So I'll kind of go into some examples from the game. And it really was this sort of well-balanced hybrid model and that actually made this a success. So rewarding, respectful, and revenue positive. So I'll quickly walk you through these examples from Merge Mansion's implementation. So first off here is optional ads. Players can choose premium currency or to watch an ad to get more energy. So as I mentioned before, giving that choice makes the experience feel fair. It's not forced. They can use the currency if they've got it, and it still helps drive revenue. The second example here is exposure to the in-app purchase store. Again, what I've mentioned, and again, another prime example here, they're regularly shown IAP options, even while they're interacting with ads in the game. So that visibility keeps IAP front of mind for your players, while still allowing these non-payers to engage meaningfully in your game. And then the final one here is appointment setting. So this is kind of like the well-known daily gift feature. So watching an ad to claim a free reward daily encourages them to come back each day. It's a subtle but effective way to drive both retention and engagement. So they know when they wake up the next morning, oh, I've got another ad to watch, and that will help me get further in this game. They might be stuck, or they might be later on in the game, and this will really benefit them. So these kind of features really show how you can layer monetization into the experience without breaking the flow or overwhelming the player too much. Now, we've covered quite a lot, but before we properly wrap up, we're going to summarize the key learnings, what worked, what we learned, and what you can apply to your own games. And I'll pass back to Zoe for this.
Thank you. So yeah, earlier we highlighted a key challenge, and I think it's an important one to remind ourselves of, is that 99% of players in free-to-play games don't make in-app purchases. That's not lost revenue. It is just untapped potential. If your monetization strategy only focuses on the 1% who do spend, you're leaving a massive audience on the table. These players, they're exactly where you want them to be. They're engaged, they're monetized. They're engaged, they're not monetized. They're active, and they're thirsty for ways to get more value within the game. So they will interact with ads when those are well implemented. But remember that the focus here is that when you add ads, you make those ads about a natural and meaningful experience within the game and not something that is detrimental to your game. Yeah, so now that the talk is coming to an end, I hope that you have that you can go home with a good amount of ideas of what you should be doing next. But let's recap real quick with 3 specific actions for you to do. So the first is start with player segmentations. Find your whales, your minnows, your non-spenders, and build some segments in order to be able to run your tests more smoothly. You will use this data to inform your ad strategy, ensuring that your ads are enhancing rather than disrupting the experience. Pilot and test before scaling up. Rather than launching monetization globally, start with small A/B tests on controlled audiences and measure the impact before scaling up. And optimize continuously. Monetization isn't a set and forget type of thing. It's important to use your data often so that you can refine placements, test different reward structures, and adjust pacing of the ads that you're adding to your game in order to maximize engagement while keeping an eye on its impact on retention and in-app purchases. And that's everything for me. I'll leave it to Franco to reinforce the most important takeaways of the session.
Perfect, thank you. So yeah, as we've said a few times now, if there's one thing to remember from today, it's this. It's monetization isn't a one-size-fits-all, and I think that's super important. Not every player is the same, and what really works best is a strategy that fits your game and then puts the player experience first. Like rewarded ads really do get a bad rep from the games that don't have this player-centric view and implementation. So yeah, let's cover these 3 main points. So ads and IAPs shouldn't compete with one another. They should complement each other, done well. They each play a role in driving revenue and engagement in your game. And rewarded ads in particular are super powerful, so they give players more value, help ease frustration at key moments, and then keep players coming back. And let's be honest, you're not going to nail it in that first attempt, and that's why testing and iteration are so important. So segment your audience, try things out, and then use the data and learnings to refine as you go. So with the right approach, hybrid monetization can really grow your revenue without sacrificing player trust, and that really is that win-win scenario. So that wraps up our session today. I hope this has given you some practical insights to take back to your teams. We're happy to answer some questions right now, or if you want, feel free to kind of grab us after this. We'll be hanging about. We'd love to hear about your games, any challenges or thoughts on what we've talked about today. And yeah, I'd just like to thank you for listening to us today. And we didn't have too many technical glitches. I didn't fall over the stage or spill water on the machine. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.